Today at 6, first the promises, now the reality. The Taliban begins to outline the way it will govern Afghanistan. Parading their power, the military equipment is American, but the policies are theirs. No women in top jobs.
In this new government which has been announced, in the top posts, I mean to say in the cabinet, they may not be women.
Donations pouring in from the public for Afghans resettling in Britain. But ministers want more councils to offer help and homes.
These people have done right by us and we want to do right by them, and integration will be critical to that.
And the Foreign Secretary under pressure from MPs over his handling of the crisis. Also tonight. If you want to party, you'll need a vaccine passport. Scotland is set to become the first UK nation to make proof of jabs compulsory. No more E5, it's all about E10. You're not alone if you're confused about what you'll be putting into your petrol tank. A 30th gold for Paralympics GB. David Smith was trailing 2-0 in the boccia final before a stunning recovery.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, Scotland resume their World Cup qualifying campaign with a tough test in Copenhagen as they face the group leaders, Denmark.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. The Taliban have mounted a victory parade complete with the US military hardware they've inherited. It was pure theatre, but we're also beginning to see the reality of what a Taliban government would look like. In an interview with the BBC, a senior leader continued to insist that Afghans with the right documents could leave the country, despite concerns they will be prevented from doing so. And whilst the group insists women will be allowed to continue working, it's becoming clear they will not be given top roles. Here's our Afghanistan correspondent, Secunda Kamani.
The Taliban are in firm control of the country. This, a huge military parade in the southern city of Kandahar, along with a captured helicopter. But the group still hasn't established a new government, leaving many Afghans in a state of limbo. Now that the final foreign troops have left, an announcement is expected soon. The last time the group was in power in the 1990s, their regime saw public executions and women banned from working. Now they say things are different, though they admit women won't be in senior positions.
Maybe they will be in the government, in the lower these things, because in every department of the government, ministries, you can say almost half of the workers are women, so they can come back to their work and they can continue. But maybe in this new government which has been announced, in the top posts, I mean to say in the cabinet, they may not be women.
The uncertainty about what the future will look like has seen the value of the Afghani drop and concerns about the economy rise. The World Bank and IMF are holding back from continuing support, whilst the US has frozen reserves and most local banks remain closed.
No one has any money right now. All their savings are stuck in the banks. People are just bringing small amounts of cash here to exchange, to pay for everyday living.
I needed money for groceries, but the exchange rate isn't good, so I'm going home. The currency rate just keeps on fluctuating. I pray that God brings stability to the government and these problems can be solved.
The Afghan economy has been heavily dependent on international aid. Whether or not that continues, at least when it comes to the West, is likely to be dependent on what kind of government the Taliban create, what kind of laws it enforces.
Governing Afghanistan is going to prove a bigger challenge for the Taliban than taking control of it. They've been holding meetings with senior political figures like former President Hamid Karzai, but many doubt whether they're willing to really share power. Their elusive leader, Mullah Haibatullah, may well be declared leader of an Islamic emirate. These new pictures of some of the final US troops to be withdrawn from Afghanistan The focus now is on what they've left behind. Sikander Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
And our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, joins us now from Kabul. Lise, so much for all those assurances we were hearing about women. No top jobs, it seems.
Yes, everyone asks the question, have the Taliban changed? Well, they've changed their tune in just 2 years. I remember when they started negotiations with representatives of Afghanistan, including Afghan female activists, and they had this formulation they used. They used it with me, they used it with the women activists about how women could hold any job. They could be ministers, they could be CEOs. They couldn't be the president, but they could have any other job in government. They also used this expression, which seemed rather curious coming from Taliban, about how women could choose their life partner. And now here we are at a totally different scenario. Even the Taliban did not expect to take power so quickly and to hold so much power. They don't have to share power anymore. Their overriding objective is to establish an Islamic emirate and to govern by Islamic Sharia law. Women will not be the face of Afghanistan anymore. They will not be in leading roles. Same with inclusive. They did have meetings, they're still having meetings with political leaders, including the former President Hamid Karzai, but we understand that those are courtesies. The Taliban will be fully in charge.
Lise, thank you very much. Now, in the past 2 weeks, we've run many reports on the desperate attempts of Afghans trying to leave the country. But imagine this, a couple who had to leave their baby behind because she didn't have the right paperwork. Gulrena is now being looked after by her grandparents back in Afghanistan. Our special correspondent, Lucy Manning, has been speaking to Gulrena's father, a British national, about how he pleaded for the 7-month-old baby to be put on an evacuation flight.
Too young to know what has happened, too small to comprehend, she is stuck in Kabul without her parents. Gulrena, one of the youngest Britons left behind.
We are missing her a lot. You know how people feel when their child is outside the country, and you know the country where there is a war and you don't know what's going to happen next.
Her parents thousands of miles away.
What?
This is the closest her dad, Mohammed, in London can get to her. He can only try to keep their bond alive. When Kabul fell, Gulrena still didn't have her UK passport. 5 months after her British father applied, his identity hidden for the family's safety.
She is stuck in Afghanistan because of the passport delay. If the passport took less time, she would have been here with us. And she is stuck there with my other part of the family, and they're all in danger. I called the consulate, when this everything happened, and they said she's not British here. You have to wait till her passport arrives, then she's British, then we can help you. I told them it's going to be too late.
Trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare, Gulrena was born unexpectedly in Kabul in January, when her mother, an Afghan, was unable to return to the UK as planned after visiting relatives because she'd lost her UK ID card. She eventually got a temporary visa to return to Britain in May to get a replacement, but had to leave Gulrena behind with grandparents. Then the Taliban took over.
I want government to help me find me way, take them out, take my daughter and my family out of Afghanistan, and the government can do anything if they want to, and they can do it. Why not?
But how do you want the government to help when they don't have any soldiers on the ground?
They can help. They can find a way. They can find a way. These are their governments.
The government says it has evacuated more than 16,000 people from Afghanistan, but it knows more must be done to support those at risk. Government advice has long been for Britons not to travel to Afghanistan. Gulrena's mother says she is lost without her baby by her side, is losing hope, and begs the government to help.
Finally.
At 3 o'clock this afternoon, Gulrena's passport finally arrived. But with nearly half her short life separated from her parents, there's now no easy way to bring her home. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Here, the government has given more details about its resettlement scheme for Afghans. Those who worked with the British government and military will be able to settle in the UK permanently. The Home Office said it wanted to ensure Afghans here receive help to rebuild their lives. The minister in charge says so far about a third of councils have offered to take part in the resettlement scheme. Our home editor Mark Easton reports.
15,000 Afghans have been evacuated to the UK in the last few weeks, and a further 5,000 are expected in the next year.
You can shake hands, but we'll do the shoulder thing. There we go. Brilliant.
Victoria Atkins has been appointed the Minister for Afghan Resettlement, overseeing what the government calls Operation Warm Welcome, but which is quickly turning into a hot political issue.
I've got 10,000 people in quarantine hotels at the moment who have to be housed as they come out. And so the challenges are big. The scale of this task is big. I don't shy away from that. But it's going to take us a little bit of time just to set some of these policy details in place.
Afghans are being given permanent residency with access to healthcare, housing, education and welfare. But having fled Kabul last month, this interpreter says it's proving difficult to start a new life here.
Do nothing. I'm just sitting at home. I'm looking for the job. I told them many times, the caseworkers, that please get me a job as soon as you can.
In Greenwich, the town hall has become an aid centre with staff and volunteers operating a 24-hour shift system. But the council's Labour leaders say support from central government has been almost non-existent.
We've received a large number, over about almost 700 newly arrived Afghans quarantining in one of our local hotels. And the pressure has been on. But not only that, they arrived, but there's been no support system in place to work with them. So, in fact, we have been stepping in the gap.
Local authorities across Britain have access to a share of £5 million in government funding for supporting and housing Afghans. But at the moment, fewer than a third of councils have offered to help find homes for the new arrivals.
The Home Office refuses to say who's come forward because they don't want to name and shame councils who may yet open their doors. But experience suggests that local authorities in East Anglia and the Fens take very few refugees and asylum seekers, while councils in the northeast and northwest of England take proportionately many more.
Here in Huddersfield, there were mixed views about whether local councils should answer the call to offer assistance.
There's not enough affordable housing, but yet they'll bring them over and they get a house so quick.
I just think that we're absolutely already overrun, full.
It's good for the economy, it's good for our culture as well that we open and embrace those people who want to settle in the UK.
The Prime Minister has said Britain owes a huge debt of gratitude to those Afghans who risked their lives to support our armed forces. But helping thousands to permanently settle in the UK is clearly a challenge for the long term. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Later today, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab is heading for talks with the governments of countries around Afghanistan. The aim is to get their help to rescue those left behind when the last British evacuation flight took off. But before heading to the region, Mr Raab came under pressure from MPs, many suggesting he should have been more active earlier in the crisis. Our political correspondent Damon Grammaticus reports.
Under pressure today, the Foreign Secretary. MPs believe he's been at the helm during the biggest foreign policy disaster in decades. So why did he fail to foresee the rapid fall of Kabul?
The central proposition was that given the troop withdrawal by the end of August, you would see a steady deterioration from that point, and that it was unlikely Kabul would fall this year.
The MP said a Foreign Office report from July had warned cities could fall.
And sorry, the source of that?
It's your principal risk report.
But Mr Raab still went on holiday.
We have UK personnel, UK civilians in harm's way, and I think it's important for us to know what you were doing and where you were doing it from. When did you go on holiday?
And are all materials.
I'm not looking to browbeat you over this, I just want to know when you went.
He said with the luxury of hindsight he wouldn't have gone. They asked why he hadn't called ambassadors in the region or even visited since he'd become Foreign Secretary.
Why did we get it so badly wrong?
I think there is a sense, a desire, absolute determination to make it work, to make things better, and to believe that you can complete the task.
And more questions about the effort to save lives. Why emails by desperate Afghans went unanswered.
We can answer every email that we get, or we can focus resource on getting as many eligible people through Kabul onto air flights, filling capacity back home.
And why he doesn't know how many are still at risk.
Could you tell me why you are confident of your numbers of those remaining in Afghanistan now?
We're not confident with any precision at all.
Finally, will the UK now deal with the Taliban?
Under what circumstances will the UK be recognised the Taliban, and what sort of recognition do you foresee?
First of all, we do not recognise governments generally, but I think it's also important not to confer any legitimacy on the Taliban. At the same time, we do need to be able to send clear and direct signals.
Mr. Rabi is now heading to the region, trying to secure exit routes for Afghans seeking to flee the Taliban. And he was, it's fair to say, given a really rough ride by those MPs, including the Conservatives. Asked if he'd considered resigning, he said no. And asked for his reflections on the whole episode, he said he thought the UK would have to learn to live within its means in future and perhaps not engage in nation building. George.
Damien, thanks very much. And the time is coming up to 16 minutes past 6, our top story this evening. As they parade their new power, the Taliban begins to outline the way it will govern Afghanistan. It says no women in top jobs. And coming up, the UN study that charts the links between climate change and the growing number of weather-related disasters.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, we look at the US Open tennis, where teenager Emma Raducanu is flying the flag as the only Briton left in the women's draw.
The group of medical experts which advises the government on vaccines has just announced that up to 500,000 people across the UK will be offered a third COVID jab in the coming months. The JCVI says it will be targeting people with severely weakened immune systems. However, the JCVI has still not decided whether 12 to 15-year-olds should be vaccinated. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
This daily cocktail of immunosuppressant medication is vital to prevent Hal Cohen's body from rejecting the kidney donated by his father. But the transplant medication also blocked his immune system from developing protection from 2 doses of COVID vaccine. The 40-year-old from North London is now eligible for a 3rd dose.
It's going to be really great for me to have a booster and hopefully give me some vaccine protection, the ability to turn to normal life, do things that other people are doing without thinking about it. But at the same time, it's not clear if the booster's going to work for myself and people like me. So we really do need to carry on looking at other treatments. See if there's any in here.
As well as transplant patients like Hal, those with blood cancers or advanced HIV will also be eligible. They'll all receive Pfizer or Moderna jabs.
We hope it will top up their immunity levels. Some of these people will not have mounted a good either antibody or T-cell memory response to 2 doses of the vaccine. And we hope a 3rd may help those individuals.
There are 2 more big decisions due on vaccines. Firstly, whether the over 80s should get a booster dose to help with waning immunity. And secondly, what about jabs for younger teens? With the new school year getting underway, there is mounting urgency for a decision on whether all 12 to 15-year-olds should be offered a COVID vaccine. Currently, only those with specific health conditions are eligible. But the scientists making the recommendation say they want to see new data on the benefits and risks. This is Emma just before she got COVID. More than a year later, the 14-year-old often struggles to walk because of persistent nausea and dizziness. A new study has found a significant minority of children do get long COVID.
Yeah, so I had to be in a wheelchair because basically the dizziness is triggered, or it gets worse by me walking around. If I start walking around, I just feel like I'm going to pass out. So it was very hard for me to get around school.
Vaccinating all over 12s would help suppress COVID outbreaks in schools. The US, France, Spain and Italy have all taken this approach. A final decision in the UK may come next week. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
The latest UK coronavirus figures show there were 35,693 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 33,754 per day in the last week. The latest figures show there were 7,598 people in hospital being treated for coronavirus on Friday. 207 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. That takes the average deaths per day over the last week to 106. On vaccinations, 88.5% of people aged 16 and over have now had their first jab, and 78.9% of the population aged 16 and over have had both doses. Vaccine passports are set to be introduced for entry to nightclubs and larger live events in Scotland later this month. Our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon, is in Glasgow for us. Lorna, this is going to be quite controversial for some.
Yes, George. One trade body has said that the move to introduce vaccine passports will cause dismay amongst businesses like nightclubs, which have only recently been able to reopen. Another industry body has said it's an unwelcome development for the licensed trade. The Scottish Liberal Democrats are the only political party to directly hit out. They've called it an illiberal move and a dangerous precedent. While the body representing Scotland's top flight football clubs has also raised concerns. They say they are surprised and they have significant questions for the Scottish Government about how it will actually work. Well, Nicola Sturgeon has said this is not a step that is being taken lightly, but she pointed out that case numbers are surging here in Scotland. They are 5 times higher than they were 4 weeks ago, and she thinks this limited use of vaccine passports could help control the virus as we move into autumn and winter.
Lorna, many thanks. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed that the double child killer, Colin Pitchfork, has been released from prison. Pitchfork was jailed in 1988 for raping and murdering 2 15-year-olds, Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth, in Leicestershire. The 61-year-old was freed after the parole board decided in June that it was safe for him to serve the rest of his life sentence on a licence in the community. ITV has been cleared by media regulator Ofcom over Piers Morgan's criticism of the Duchess of Sussex. His comments that he didn't believe what Meghan said in her interview with Oprah Winfrey in March led to nearly 58,000 complaints and resulted in him leaving the show Good Morning Britain. The number of weather-related disasters around the world has increased 5-fold over the past 50 years, according to scientists from the United Nations. In the first ever long-term analysis of its kind, they say climate change is causing more intense and more frequent extreme weather. But far fewer people are dying now due to storms, floods and droughts, and that's thanks to better early warning systems. Our chief environment correspondent, Justin Rowlatt, has more.
Floodwaters engulf cars.
Oh my God! Yo!
Roofs are ripped off buildings as Hurricane Ida smashes into the US earlier this week. The Category 4 hurricane is just one of a long list of weather-related disasters to hit the world this year.
Wow.
There have been heat waves and terrible forest fires in the US, South America, Europe and Siberia. No. And there have been terrible floods too, including in Germany and in China. Meanwhile, a drought in Madagascar is reckoned to be affecting 400,000 people. It is all part of a pattern of increasing extreme weather, says the UN.
Climate change is boosting this natural variability that we have. That means more rain, it means higher temperatures, drought, more forest fires and also most intense tropical storms.
So take a look at this graph. Now the red line is showing us that the number of weather-related disasters has gone up 5-fold over the last 50 years. The black line shows that the economic impact of those disasters has also increased. Look at it, up 8-fold. But the good news is the grey line is showing us the number of people who've died in those disasters has fallen 3-fold. That falling death rate shows warning people when bad weather is on the way can save lives.
So although we're seeing an increase in the number of disastrous events, the mortality rate is actually decreasing over the last 5 decades. And that's really down to the fact we've improved early warning systems. So we can notify people when an extreme event is about to happen so that they can take contingency plans to save lives.
But we need to go on improving those systems
because unless the world makes dramatic reductions to greenhouse gas emissions, scientists warn we can expect even more extreme weather events. Justin Rolat, BBC News.
A more eco-friendly petrol has been introduced at filling stations across Britain today. The fuel, called E10, contains less carbon than other motor fuels, making it better for the environment. But it's not suitable for some older vehicles. Our correspondent, John Kay, is at the M4 Lee Delamere services for us now. John.
Yeah, George, around half the cars on the UK's roads run on petrol. So this move to a new type of fuel, unleaded fuel, will affect millions and millions of us. But if you've never heard about it, don't worry, you're not alone. According to the RAC, around a quarter of motorists have got no idea what E10 is or whether their car is compatible. What are you going for?
Unleaded.
Which one?
Just the normal one.
But what is normal? Confusion at the pumps this afternoon as the new fuel went on sale.
That is E10.
What do you mean?
E10? What's that? It's what you've got in your hand.
Oh no, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Would you? Unleaded, that's as far as I know. I don't really pay attention, I just fill it up and leave.
Did you know you were filling up with E10?
No, I don't know what is E10.
It's unleaded fuel up to 10% ethanol, which means lower carbon emissions.
So they're trying to reduce the amount of the nasty stuff in the fuel, right?
Yeah, well, it's still not great, is it, having a car? But we'll use the ecological petrol when we can.
Drop by drop, E10 goes on sale across Great Britain this month, with Northern Ireland to follow next year. The new fuel isn't great, though, for some older vehicles made before 2011.
So drivers need to go onto the government online website today and check whether their car is E10 compatible or not. If it's not, then they should be switching to E5 Super Unleaded. That's more expensive. Unfortunately not available in as many filling stations either.
If you put the new E10 in your car by mistake and it's not compatible, how big a problem is that?
It's not the end of the world. It's not the same as putting diesel into a petrol tank or petrol into a diesel tank.
The new fuel should cut UK carbon emissions by 750,000 tonnes a year. And experts say we shouldn't notice too much difference in fuel efficiency or in price.
There you go, your first E10.
Thank you very much.
John Kay, BBC News on the M4 in Wiltshire.
It's been another day of success for Paralympics GB, with David Smith winning the team's 30th gold of the Tokyo Games in the B1 boccia. Andy Swiss reports on all the day's action and a warning it contains some flashing images.
He's the man with the colourful hair and the golden touch. A third Paralympic title for David Smith, won in the most thrilling fashion. Boccia is a sport similar to bowls, the aim to get as near the jack as possible. And in the final, Smith was locked at 2-2 against Malaysia's Chu Wei Lun. But just when he needed it, a moment of magic.
Oh, nice. Plays that up.
That dazzling shot proved the difference. And after a roar of victory, soon the tears started to flow. Another gold for one of the greatest his sport has ever seen.
Well, that gold medal from David Smith was Britain's 30th of these Paralympics, but their hopes of a 31st today proved tantalisingly out of reach.
In the pool, Becky Redfern was chasing the mother of all comebacks. Barely a year after the arrival of baby Patrick, she was heading for gold in the 100 metres breaststroke before Germany's Elena Kravtsov edged her out.
She takes it.
But at a Games she could only compete in because they were postponed. A silver is some feat. There was also an array of British bronze for wheelchair racer Sammy Kinghorn in the 100 metres and for archer Victoria Rumery, bang on target on her Paralympic debut. In the table tennis, meanwhile, there were mixed fortunes. Two British teams had to settle for bronze after losing their semi-finals. But in a different class, it was a different story, as Paul Karabardak and Will Bailey battled back from the brink to make it to their final. It was like a miracle, Karabardak said, and fair to say it's one they certainly enjoyed. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Tokyo.
And it's time for the weather now with Stav Daneas. Hi, Stav.
Hi there, George. Thanks very much. Good evening to you. Well, the Met Office have issued their summer 2021 stats, and it's been certain one of unusual contrast, with much of the north and the west of the country seeing warmer, sunnier and drier than average conditions compared to the south and the east, which has actually been cooler, cloudier and wetter. And in fact, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland has seen one of their warmest summers on record. And we've also had that contrast the last few days, and certainly today, the best of the sunshine, Scotland, Northern Ireland, whereas further south, we saw a lot of cloud, particularly across most of England and Wales. And we hold on to that trend for the next few days. Clearer skies across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland tonight mean another chilly one. Temperatures down into low single digits in 1 or 2 spots. But where we hold on to the cloud and the breeze, then 10 to 13 Celsius. So we start tomorrow off a rather cloudy note for many of us. But again, through the day, we'll start to see increasing sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps Northern England too. But for much of the rest of England and Wales, it'll stay rather cloudy here. Spots of drizzle at times across some eastern areas where the cloud will be thickest. Again, cooler along North Sea coast. Where you have the sunshine, though, the low 20s in Celsius. And a similar story again on Friday. Most of the cloud will be across southern and eastern areas. Best of the sunshine further west, where it'll also feel warmer. Now we head on into the weekend, and originally we did think this area of low pressure would invade and bring some cooler and wetter weather. It now looks like this area of high pressure, which has been with us for a while, will park itself towards the east of Europe, and that's going to allow a warm south-southeasterly wind to push up from the near continent. So through this weekend and indeed into next week, it's actually going to turn warmer. Rather average temperatures on Saturday, but increasing sunshine by the time we reach Sunday. It's going to start to feel warmer right across the board. George.
Thank you, Stav. And that's all from the BBC's News at 6, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we can now join the BBC's news teams where you are.